flow is always happening. And sometimes when people ask me, Oren, I want to be able to live in the flow more. I want to be able to experience the magic of life more and be in this zone, in this in step with life where things are manifesting effortlessly in the right place at the right time. Magic occurrences, the magic of the flow. When people ask me, I think one simple thing that is not really saying how to be in the flow more often, but sort of points at or gives some insight that can naturally allow you to be in the flow more often, is simply by understanding what the flow is and what the flow isn't. Because what happens is, since when we're in the flow, we're not actually in our mind, so we are in a space that goes beyond our mind, it goes beyond our five senses. That's one of the things that makes it difficult to, from an intellectual standpoint, try to articulate or explain what we did or what I did to get in the flow, because your sense of self, the I, you could say the personality, how you defined yourself disappears and melts into all of life. You become in sync with your body and your mind, become in sync with your spirit, which is in sync with the whole. And I think that's why we come up with a bunch of misunderstandings about what the flow is or isn't. So then when we try to be in the flow more often, our ideas about how we can do that are somewhat built on our perspective of what the flow is in the first place. And so one of the things I say to people sometimes is you can't gain or lose the flow. The flow is always happening. You can either experience yourself being in the flow, or you can experience yourself being out of the flow, or going against the flow of life, or fighting the true self. These are all really saying the same thing, but the flow it's its own station. And when you come in step with it, when you come in sync with it, and as I said, that I that you might define, that is your personality, your expression, the more finite aspect of yourself starts to loosen up and blend into the broader aspect of yourself, then you essentially become one with the flow, which is always existing. I feel like that's really important to understand if you want to be able to have more flow experiences, because that's the magic question, right? That's the billion-dollar question, is what is the flow? But the whole purpose of that question is because it's I want to experience the flow more often, right? And so knowing that you can't gain or lose the flow, and that you're not actually separate from the flow, is a fundamental piece of knowledge that will help you experience the flow more often. The other thing I think that is really amazing about the flow, and that I find myself in conversation of lately, is that a lot of times when people start to experience the flow more and more and more often in different areas of their life, then there's these exceptions, or there seem to be these exceptions. It's there's the flow, but but the flow is not practical. For example, practical would be let's say something that seems to be more complex, seems to be more intricate, interacting with other people within a business and within timelines and deadlines. It's well, how am I just going to go with the flow and be in this open, connected state? It's not practical. And what I'm saying is, whether you understand this or not, whether our minds can grasp this or not, even logically, how could it not be practical? It's actually the most practical thing. I had a woman in Oklahoma recently say to me, she's talking about the flow, and then she's talking about versus structure. See, that versus is actually a separation now. And what she was implying is that when you're in the flow, there is no structure. And so therefore, the value that we get from structure and timelines and organizational and things that allow us to focus our energy, it seems like she's basically saying, well, you don't get that when you're in the flow. And that was astounding to me to even realize in that moment. I was if you think about it, I said, the flow is the immaculate, quintessential example of structure. It's just that it's so infinitely, intricately complex and so far beyond our mind's ability to fathom, that when we say, the I in our minds, our knowledge, we can't wrap our minds around that. So therefore, we don't necessarily have the experience of the flow as being structured. And so therefore, we don't necessarily draw our sense of security and stability, we can rely on the flow to structure our life. But it is structured. Look at nature. Look at the systems and the functions of our body and how effortlessly they function, how seamless it is. It's the immaculate structure.